Call this council meeting to order. At this time, just if we could, for those that are in the audience, please silence your devices, and if you are able, please stand for our national anthem, which will be followed by our land acknowledgement.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
The Niagara region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway-Wendourok, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The city of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live.
This time.
Oh, Canada.
Sorry. Good song to hear twice. Nothing wrong with that. We have two changes to the agenda tonight. First, we're going to move item 8, presentations, up in the agenda and have Azur present after item 5, disclosures of interest. And then secondly, we're pulling item 21.1, the confidential planning and development verbal report from the closed session agenda. It will not be considered tonight. So if I could have Councillors Acklin and Beauregard move that the council agenda dated November 26, 2024 be confirmed as amended. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? Okay, perfect. So this time we have a presentation from Azur Sustainable Fuels, and and I'd like to turn the floor over to Paul Bowen, Chief Operating Officer, Becky Marks, Regulatory and Permitting Lead, and Vanessa Vredenberg, Director of Indigenous and Stakeholder Relations, for their presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Steele and Council.
Start over.
Thank you, Mayor Steele and councillors, for the opportunity to present tonight. And I wanted to thank you for the warm welcome that we've had in your community. Quick introduction about Azur Sustainable Fuels. So the company was founded 3 years ago. The 3 founders of Azur ran a company previously called True North Renewable Diesel. They were able to monetize that company and spun it off into Azur, recognizing the opportunity to build a company that could produce sustainable aviation fuel, really the only way that you can decarbonize air travel in the world today. We are a company of about 14 people based in Calgary, private company, wholly owned Canadian company. We have 4 locations, 3 in Canada, 1 in the US. Port Colborne, Ontario, Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, Kamloops, British Columbia, and Cherryvale, Kansas. The current state of our project is that since we last spoke, we've been developing what's called front-end engineering and design. We're coming to a close on this exercise for all 4 of our facilities, which means that we will be in a situation that should we be able to find private equity funding, we could take an investment decision and start moving some of these projects forward. The current state of environmental and regulatory applications, we are shovel ready in Kansas. We have full regulatory approval. In Manitoba, we're also shovel ready, and we are waiting on the final environmental license expected first quarter of next year. In Ontario, we are near completion of our risk assessment for the piece of property that we're proposed building on, and expect to make application for regulatory approval in the first quarter of next year. On that timeline, how that would move forward in Port Colborne is that we see a 12 to 18-month duration for regulatory approval, which puts us in a situation to make a positive final investment decision in the middle of 26, and you'd be producing by the middle of 2029. Currently, we are in process. So what that means is we have partnered with an investment bank called Mizuho, and we're looking for strategic investors and grants to execute these projects. The current status is that we are exploring and assessing expressions of interest, and we feel that sometime late this year or early next year that we will start to have come to terms with minority equity investors, and we'll be able to continue the process to raise funds to build these facilities. Anything else to add? So that's a brief introduction. I'm going to have Vanessa and Becky come up. I'd like to open it to questions from council. Please.
So, council, any questions? Councilors? Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. It's a pleasure seeing you again. When we were at FCM, Councillor Bagu, and the mayor stopped at your offices. It seems that you were on the same track as you were that you espoused then, and I know we had hoped for us to be second in that pecking order. It sounds like that hasn't changed if things go forward. I think from my point of view, just for public consumption, I had asked the question there and now here. I think for us, what we want to be concerned about, given in a smaller community and the proximity to residential, well, really, when you're talking about any smoke or anything that would exit the plant, I think the local residents would be highly concerned about things like noise, smell, odors, those type of things. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that issue. And I know we pursued the opportunity with you to visit an operating plant to ensure that that technology is accepted in that community, and that there, whomever could go from Port Colborne would be able to see and witness and talk to people in that community, as well as witness whether there is any effluent smell or smoke. Sure. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to those issues and if that offer is still acceptable to you guys.
So the first part about emissions, I'm going to ask Becky Marks to respond to.
So we have not completed our modeling for this site. It was supposed to be done prior. We have an open house tomorrow. However, they're a little behind schedule in that. When those results are available, we will, of course, make them available to you. We know from our Manitoba site that, I guess we could say facility emissions, noise, we don't expect odor, are well below the Manitoba air quality, which is higher than Ontario's quality standards, and they're below the federal government standards as well. So we're not expected to be a significant source of emissions or noise or vibration. However, we have to take into the cumulative effects in the area with your other industrial companies in the area. So, like I said, as soon as we have those, we'll make sure they're available to you.
Great.
Yeah.
Councillor Bruno, so the offer still stands to visit an operating site. However, we've licensed our technology from Shell, and the site that they are constructing, or were constructing in Pernis, which is in Rotterdam, Netherlands, has been put on hold. So should the project get over the hurdles that they're currently facing and get back into construction. It would certainly be an opportunity for us to visit both during construction, so you can get a feel for what construction activities would be like, and once it's operating, to understand the impact on the community.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one other, I don't know if there would be, perhaps not in your group, but is there an operating site elsewhere in North America?
So one of the competing technologies, which is UOP Honeywell, has 9 facilities operating around the world, and a 10th coming online right now in China. So there would be an opportunity for us to go and see those sites. I've already cleared with UOP the opportunity to see it. As it's competing technology, they're still willing to tour us on the site. So in North America, there's 4 operating sites. So that would be possible for sure.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Baggy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for seeing you again. One question, do you have an idea on the employment opportunities once you're up and running, I guess? I know there's construction employment and there's operating employment, just a general.
Sure do. Actually, it's more than general. We've done a lot of work onto trying to understand how we will staff the facility. So for construction, we see a gradual ramp up to roughly 1,500 craft labor over a 3-year period of construction. Once operating, the plant would employ between 125 and 150 people. And we see the economic impact to your community being in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 to each of our employees. And the expected life of the facility is 40 years.
Councilor?
I might not be here in 40 years, Mr. Mayor, but
Be more optimistic, Councilor.
I hope I'm not here in 40 years, Mr. Mayor, to tell you the truth. For your product, I have a little bit of insight because we've talked to you before.
Sure.
And so most of your product will be shipped out by rail and truck, if I'm not mistaken.
Rail, yes, that's correct.
Rail.
And we also see the Welland Canal as an opportunity to ship. So not only does the Welland Canal provide us an opportunity to ship product, but as your canal gets busier, because our facility will have the ability to produce both renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, we can provide renewable diesel directly to ships in the canal and help decarbonize that way.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
We'll see you again tomorrow.
Sounds great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, tomorrow at the Valet Center from 2 to 7 or 3 to 7? Yeah, 3 to 7? Yeah, the Golden Puck Room, 3 to 7. Or sorry, is it 3 to 6? I apologize. Every time we have a public meeting at a different time. So 3 to 6, Valet Health and Wellness Center, Golden Puck Room in the main rink. Okay. So next we have a public meeting. It's a proposed stop, up, and close portion of road network off of Page Street, 2024-189. And I have to officially open this public meeting for report 2024-189. The proposed stop, up, and close portion of road network off of Page Street. And if I can get Councilors Danch and Bodner to move this to get on the floor, and I can turn this over to Bram Cotton, Economic Development Officer. Mr. Cotton, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mayor and Council, Report 2024-189 is recommending or is bringing forward the request for a stop, up, and close at the corner of Main and Page Street. It's an unused piece of city, unused and unneeded piece of street that we have the opportunity to potentially sell in the near future. And we're just requesting a stop, up, and close for that part of the street. We have done consultations with our colleagues in the different departments here in the city, and it is an area that they see no future need of, and we'd like to move this forward.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council on this? Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship, through you to our Economic Development Officer. Bram, will there be like a full cost recovery if we had to do a environmental or the legals, that type of thing, and then I'm assuming some kind of appraisal?
Mr. Cotton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. Yes, so there would be full cost recovery. We have had appraisal company give us estimates in the past that we're using as we would calculate any price, because it is a very small parcel. But yes, we would be having full cost recovery for any future sale.
Okay, further questions? Okay. Now, there isn't anybody here in the crowd, I don't see, that is here, better make sure. Mr. Cotton, and through the clerk's office, have we received any written letters on this?
No, we haven't.
Okay, all right. Okay, seeing no further questions, we've had Councillor Danchenbader move this. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Brent. So the Chief Administrative Office Report 2024-189 has been received, and that the Economic Development Officer is directed to bring forward a stop, up, and close bylaw for a portion of Page Street, registered as a public highway and described as part of PIN 64150-0070. The public highway, part of Bell Street Plan 785 Hubbardston, which is now called Page Street, lying between Main Street East and Dolphin Street, Port Colborne, shown in Appendix A to a future meeting of council for consideration. Okay, so that's been duly moved, seconded, and passed. Proclamations, I have the, for December 3rd, 2024. Oh, I apologize, yes. So we thank everyone. The public meeting for the proposed stop, up, and close off of Page Street is now adjourned, and we'll go back to our regular meeting. Good to have a good clerk here, eh? So for December 3rd for 2024 is Giving Tuesday. If I could have Councillors Bodner and Bagu move, whereas Giving Tuesday is an annual celebration of generosity and volunteerism, which is celebrated and recognized in over 180 countries across the globe. And whereas Giving Tuesday falls immediately after Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend, and asks people to give to the less fortunate after having spent on luxuries during this year's hottest sales. And whereas since 2012, Giving Tuesday has raised billions of dollars for charities and nonprofits across Canada, the U.S., and the world. And whereas since forming in 2021, Niagara Gives and Giving Tuesday has inspired more than $300,000 in charitable donations to local Niagara organizations. And whereas Giving Tuesday brings together businesses, charities, families, and entire communities to tackle real issues and create a better world for all, whereas the City of Port Colborne recognizes and celebrates the incredible contributions of individuals and organizations and recognizes the increasing need for their services. Now be it resolved that I, William C. Steele, Mayor, do hereby declare December the 3rd, 2024 as Giving Tuesday in the City of Port Colborne. Questions? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay, there are no delegations this evening. And Councillor Davies is away, so he's obviously not here this evening. So if you do have any regional council questions, I can take those also. So on to the Mayor's report. The Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation celebrated the grand reopening of the historic Council House in Hagersville. I was invited on behalf of Council the afternoon of October the 25th, and it was a great event. I was one of several mayors in attendance, including Richmond Hill Mayor David West and Pelham Marv Junkin. We were joined by Philomena Tassi, Federal Minister of the Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, better known as FedDev. The building was originally constructed in 1882. The Council House on Mississauga Road in Hagersville was the seat of the Anishinaabe governance and a gathering place for more than a century. The first renovations, a new furnace and new windows, were done almost a century later in the 1970s. Now, more than 50 years later, the current major restoration was supported by FedDev, the Mississauga First Nation Community Trust, and the Ontario Trillium Foundation. This historic council house is now restored to serve the community for another 100 years. I had a great conversation with Chief Claire Salt, who leads the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We discussed our shared interests and challenges, and we promised to collaborate at our earliest opportunity, which I have. I brought that forward to Mr. Higginbotham, and he'll be reaching out through his department, and then as well as myself, we'll be meeting the chief soon. We were hoping she was here for the SI Kase groundbreaking, but she was called away at the last minute. So I did touch base with a couple of her representatives there, and we will be hopefully in the new year getting together with our staff and Chief Salt and her staff. Ontario's Minister of Tourism, Culture and Gaming, the Honourable Stan Cho, visited our fair city this past Friday morning. He specifically asked for a tour of significant sites in our city, including Sugarloaf Marina, Standard Marine Terminals, the future site of the Waterfront Community Centre, Nickel Beach, our museum, our library, Roselawn Centre, and Lighthouse Theatre. It was not the prettiest day because it rained most of the time, but he called my office late Friday afternoon to say how impressed he was with our city and with our hospitality. Thank you to our staff for putting together a fantastic presentation early Friday morning, so the minister understood what before we what is what in Port Colborne before we headed out to see the sights in person. The video presentation of local scenes and annual highlights provided perspective for him while we drove him around the city, and the province. He and the province have big plans for Niagara with regards to tourism, and he intends to include us, and we will have him back again soon. A fire destroyed Grace Church on Empire Road on December the 8th, 2020, and on Sunday afternoon, November the 24th, this past Sunday, I was honored, along with Councillors Aquilina and Bodner, to join parishioners in a ceremony to break ground for a new church. It's been a long journey for Grace Church. The fire, the pandemic, working and worshiping in temporary spaces in Shirkston Community Centre, and since last spring holding services on the property of a local Christian farm family. On behalf of council, we congratulate Pastor Stephen Brown and the members of Grace Church for keeping the church going, and we wish you all the best for the swift construction of your new building. I get calls in my office weekly, and I am sure every councillor does also, from Port Colborne residents pleading with us to do something about speeding, and we have taken many measures and will continue to do so. The solution is actually very simple. Stop speeding. The limit is 50 kilometers per hour in just about every town and city in Niagara. Please train your brain and your foot to keep it at 50 as you drive around town, specifically 40 kilometers through school zones. The Niagara Regional Police are working with us to reduce speeders in Port Colborne, and 2 weeks ago, police ticketed 21 speeders over the course of 2 days on Chippewa Road. On behalf of council, I ask every driver in our city to be responsible for themselves and be respectful of others. Please slow down. It's officially Christmas season in Port Colborne. Last week, the downtown BIA had an extremely successful Fa La 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 Ladies Night shopping event. There were 4 craft shows in the city on the weekend, including the annual Christmas market at the Roselawn Centre. If you haven't put up your lights yet, get busy because you can participate in the home decorating contest. Winners are chosen by the community and will receive a $200 gift card to a Port Colborne grocery food store of their choice. There are 2 categories: the best lawn display and house lights, and the best balcony and door display. You must enter by December the 9th. Details are on our city website. There's also a Christmas decorating contest for businesses and storefronts, and both of those are done by the Main Street BIA and the Downtown BIA. And details of those business contests are also on the city's website. This Sunday, the first Sunday in December, as always, is the Grand Old Christmas Festival at the museum. Grand Old Christmas Festival features all our favorite things: puddings, Councillor Bruno, chestnuts roasting on an open fire, cider simmering in a cauldron, Christmas pudding in the carriage house, Santa in the schoolhouse, and so many more traditional festive favorites. Our annual lighted parade is always the first Saturday of December, and this year it's the evening of December 7th. And one of the city floats, and probably my favorite, will have the children whose art was chosen for the mayor's Christmas card. In another parade entry, we'll have the children who won the Paint a Plow contest from DeWitt Carter and Steele Street Schools, and they'll be walking with their winning plows. Along the way, we'll also collect non-perishable food, So if you are able, when you're watching our parade, to bring something, we ask you to contribute, and then just give those to our volunteers that are walking along with the city float. The city has an all-hands-on-deck holiday collection drive in support of Port Cares and Birchway. New unwrapped toys or books, non-perishable food, used clean coats, and new mittens may be dropped at the Fire Hall on Calally Street West, the Engineering and Operations Center right next door to the Fire Hall, the Valet Health and Wellness Center on Elizabeth Street, City Hall on Charlotte Street, and at the Port Colborne Public Library on King Street. We thank you in advance for your gifts, contributions, and support. There are families in our community who need our help. Let's make it a wonderful Christmas for them too. And that's the end of my report. Questions or any regional questions? Seeing none. Motions arising from committees and boards. Committee of the Whole Budget 2025, proposed user fees and charges. I just got to hand something off from the clerk to Councillor Bruno. I'll mention that for you. So to get it on the floor, if I could have Councillors Elliott and Bodner move the Corporate Services Department Report 2024-183 be received, that the 2025 proposed user fees and charges schedules attached as Appendix A to P of Corporate Services Report 2024-183 be approved, and that the draft bylaw attached as Appendix Q of Corporate Services Report 2024-183 be brought forward to Council for consideration. Are there any amendments, questions on this? Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the amendment regarding user fees and charges bylaw, I'd like to make an amendment to Section 5 of the 2025 user fees and charges bylaw to increase the sponsorship amount that staff are delegated to authorize from $50,000 to $100,000. That the amended version of Appendix N Planning and Development fees be so approved.
Councillor Beauregard, you'll second that? Part 2 of that is what you brought forward at our last meeting when this was here. So you're fine with the report that came forward with that change? Okay. Questions on the amendment? So one is to increase staff's delegation from 50,000, which it's been for the longest time, up to 100. And then Councillor Beauregard brought forward direction that we supported for staff to come back with the major and minor changes for planning fees. Any questions on either of those? All in favor? That's carried. So now to the motion as amended. Are there any further questions with regards to these fees? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 20.2, Committee of the Whole Budget 2025 Rates Budget 2024-215. If I could have Councillors Bruno and Danch move that Corporate Services Department Report 2024-215 be received, and that the 2025 rates budget and debt substitution as outlined in Report 2024-215 be approved. Questions? No questions. All in favor? That's carried. 20.3, Committee of the Whole Budget 2025 Rate Setting 2024-216. If I could have Councillors Beauregard and Aquilina move that the Corporate Services Department Report 2024-216 be received, that the 2025 water wastewater rates as outlined in Corporate Services Report 2024-216 be approved, that the 2025 storm sewer rates as outlined in Corporate Services Report 2024-216 be approved, that the draft bylaw attached as Appendix A of Corporate Services Report 2024-216 be brought forward to Council for consideration. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. Consent agenda. Councillor Bodner has lifted items 13.3A and 13.4A. Councillor Bagu has lifted item 13.3B, and Councillor Bruno has lifted item 13.3E. Are there any other items under the consent agenda to be brought forward? Councillor Beauregard?
Through your worship, could I pull 13.4B? Receipt of correspondence.
4B under correspondence, yeah. Okay. Anything else to be pulled? Councilor Bodnar? 13.3A, billing of the Zavitz drain. And 13.4A, which is under correspondence, the city of Thorold. Okay? Any other items?
Sorry.
Yep.
Just a second. Something else for you? No, sorry.
Guys are fine? Okay. So on the remainder of the items that haven't been pulled, if I could have Councillors Bodnar and Danch move the remaining items be passed. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so we have Councillor Bodnar, billing of the Zavitz Municipal Drain 2024-194. Oh, you want to start with that one first? I apologize. We're going to start with 14.1, based on what the clerk has indicated. The East Side Employment Lands Update Engineering and Subject Matter Expert Services 2024-221. If I could have Councillors Bodnar and Elliott move that Public Works Department Report 2024-221 be received, that the council support staff to make an application to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks to amend the city's water and wastewater licensing to accommodate the proposed alterations and additions to the city's water and wastewater systems for the development of the East Side Employment Lands, that funding for engineering and subject matter expert service to complete the full build-out of the East Side Employment Lands for the estimated amount of $3,100,000 be approved, that the Director of Public Works and Director of Corporate Services Treasurer be authorized to execute contracts and related documents as required to directly appoint Associated Engineering to carry out the remaining detailed design and engineering services to complete the full build-out of the East Side Employment Lands and connect to the Asai Kase development. Mr. Pilon.
Good evening, everyone. As you're all aware, staff in the city, we've been working diligently on our East Side Employment Lands project, which of course is also directly connected to the construction of the Asai Kase battery separator plant. In the past year, you've seen a couple council reports come through relating to the design of the first phase of construction to bring servicing to Asai Kase. We have another report tonight, and we figured now would be a good time to kind of bring everybody up to speed on how we even got here in the first place, where we are right now, and what to expect going forward. So today I also have Joe Colacerto here to help answer any questions, and Mark Belanger from AE, who is the project lead from Associated Engineering. Next slide, please. So just to give you guys a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about how we got here, where we are right now, some benefits we're seeing already out of the development and what to expect in the future, a little bit of financials, and of course the recommendation. So starting off with how we got here, next slide. So there's actually a few projects that were completely unrelated to each other that ended up enabling us to tell Asai Kase that Port Colborne is a place that they can build. The first project, some of you were probably on council at the time in 2014, was when the city retained a consultant to complete environmental assessment and detailed design of the what we now call the East Side Employment Lands. So that is Progress Drive North, or formerly Ramey Road. So that assessment was completed, the design was completed, but it was largely just shelved due to a lack of appetite to fund it, and not a lot of appetite either from the industrial side to build. Moving forward in 2022, the Niagara region completed their environmental assessment of completing a new servicing tunnel underneath the canal, and that would bring additional water and wastewater servicing to the east side. So currently, there's only one wastewater force main that conveys flow from the east side of the city to the west to their treatment plant. That water main has aged and is at risk of breaking, so they would like to install a new one. There's currently also two drinking water mains that bring fresh water from the west side of the city to the east side. And again, it doesn't hurt to have a redundancy of supply, and you're already building the tunnel anyways, you might as well put the infrastructure in. Also increases capacity. So then, of course, we had the announcement of the Asai plant coming to Port Colborne. And while it's only been public knowledge for the past couple of months, since about May, the city has been working with the developer BMI and Asai on proving to them that we can get the servicing to their site. So we've been engaged with them for just over a year now. So the Asai development is what brought our two projects, both the East Side Employment Lands and the Servicing Tunnel Crossing, together, and saying with the tunnel we can bring the water to the east side and get it up to your site through the East Side Employment Lands. We already have drawings for this. We already have our environmental assessment. We can do this in the time frame that you guys need. And then coincidentally, we also have the Elite Homes development, which has been proposed. And when we engaged them, we knew that the 2,200 unit proposed development, the east side of the city just doesn't have the sanitary capacity to take that development on without doing major infrastructure upgrades to the east side. So we engaged them and said, hey, we're building the tunnel. It's going right to the wastewater treatment plant. We'll put in a pipe for you. If you guys come online, you can connect to that pipe. There's no added flows to the east side. They get a direct connection to the treatment plant. It's a win for everybody. So next slide, please. So with the construction of the new battery separator plant underway, the city has made commitments to bring water to that site by Q2 of 2026. Now, they only need the water immediately. They don't need the wastewater right away. That'll be important later on. So as you might recall, in the beginning of 2024, we released an RFP to source a design consultant for the design of a water main up to Asai site, and that was awarded to Associated Engineering. At the beginning of 2024, the region also released their RFP for the design of the servicing tunnel, and that was also awarded to Associated Engineering. Similarly, BMI has also retained Associated Engineering to complete their servicing. So now there is just a joint project team between the region, Associated Engineering, the city, BMI, Asai, and we're all just working together, which is really, we found a lot of efficiencies in doing that. For example, the city is fronting a lot of the work on the region's projects in terms of procuring sub-consultants like geotechnical, topo surveys, environmental consultants, and that's just because our procurement is so much faster than the region's. So we were able to shave weeks off their timeline, and we're also able to save a lot of cost just by purchasing those services in bulk. And we've got some pretty competitive pricing that we weren't expecting. So to date, the city's phase one of the East Side Employment Lands project, we're sitting at about 75 to 90% complete. We just had some changes that we're deciding to proceed with that sets us back a little bit, but nothing to be concerned about. And over the course of the last summer, we began our background investigations for these projects. So that includes the geotechnical, the SUE investigation, which is determining where your existing utilities are, your environmental or natural environment surveys. The city, for the most part, we don't have any issues with the natural environment surveys because all our infrastructure is in existing right-of-way, so there's no habitat there. The region's a bit of a different story because their water main is going through the old Robin Hood lands, which hasn't been disturbed for decades. So there's no toads there, thankfully, but there are some species at risk snakes, so we're looking to mitigate that. So with these 90% design drawings just about complete, We're looking to release a tender at the very start of 2025, awarded to a contractor, and have construction start almost immediately. The region's tunnel portion, their design's a little more complicated, going underneath the canal. They're looking to tender their construction in spring of next year. Next slide, please. So, just to give you an idea of some of the benefits that we're currently seeing and expected to see. So the first phase of the Asai-Kasei production is expected to employ 300 people, and that is only just the first phase. There is the potential to add more phases to that site, but I don't believe there's job numbers for those just yet. And it also doesn't include those tertiary jobs for, you never know, suppliers might show up, other sectors, and kind of similar to when a Walmart lands and they build their super center, you know, you get the Mark's Work Warehouse or the Dollarama or whichever, these smaller companies that show up. There's still lots of room in the East Side Employment Lands and at their sites in the north for additional companies, so we're expecting to see some development there. With the tunnel crossing complete, it's also just reduced risk for the city and the region on supply of servicing. So if a water main were to break, we have to shut one down. You still have the other one plus this one, and we're also reducing the risk of still using that outdated sanitary force main that's currently the only way to get wastewater from the east side of the city to the west. And then, of course, the Elite Homes is still there with a potential for 2,200 units, which is just bringing that many more homes into the city, which I know we're all struggling with. We've also heard good news stories from Ellis Don in that the project construction is also fueling local businesses. So, for example, Rankin, they were the general contractor for the earthworks on that job. When the stone came in, all that stone is getting pulled from PCQ, Lot Crush Stone, Walkers, and everybody hauling that stone is just a local, triaxle truck driver and dispatcher. We also heard, Ellis Don is purchasing a lot of their equipment, for example, like Kubotas through Berg in Wainfleet, and all the steel that will go into the framing of the building is all coming out of Welland. So, like I said, even before the plant's online, we're already starting to see an impact on local businesses. Next slide, please. So, as I'm sure everyone is aware, as it's impossible to miss while you're driving along the 140, construction at the Asai-Kasei site is underway and was actually underway prior to the announcement. You may have saw some equipment there already moving earth. So where are we today with Asai-Kasei? Well, they started with the earthworks, which was involved moving over 1 million cubic meters of dirt, which is really hard to put in perspective, but it's about 100,000 dump trucks that was moved. The center of their site required a 7-meter cut, so that's to say that the middle of their site was 7 meters too high from where they needed it to be, so they had to cut that whole site down by 7 meters, and now it's pushed up along Highway 140, as you can see there. After the earth moving was done, they brought in all the stone for the roads and the building base, and right now they're currently putting in some 1,500 piles that will support the foundation and structure of the building. Just a week and a bit ago, we had the groundbreaking ceremony there, and obviously some council members were there and city staff, a bunch of representatives from the region as well. And going forward, talking to Ellis Don, they said you can expect to see the skeleton of that building by spring of 2025. Maybe not fully complete, but above ground works are going to be starting shortly. Next slide, please. So, with all that being said, here's where we're headed. Phase 1 construction, as I mentioned, it's about set 90%, though it's a little set back recently, with a tender expected to be released in early 2025 and construction following right after. In the council report, you'll see a more detailed explanation of the project phases, but in short, phase 1 is all the infrastructure that is required to bring Asai-Kasei online. There's a lot more in the East Side Employment Lands that we want to do, but because we're on a time crunch in getting Asai-Kasei online, that's getting pushed to a later phase. So phase 2 construction, that includes just the sanitary pump station, That's been broken out into its own phase just because there's a lot more approvals and design that prolongs that. And so even though we're installing the sanitary infrastructure in phase 1, it won't be online until phase 2 is complete. As I mentioned, that's okay because Asai doesn't need the wastewater right away. They just need the water. But you're digging the trench anyways, put the pipes in the ground. It just makes sense. And then phase 3 is when you'll see the full build-out turnkey operation of Eastside Employment Lands. That's roads, curbs, gutters, streetlights, an extension down to Progress Drive South. We're looking at a new connection to Highway 140. Again, all of that's not critical to bring Asai online, but that would be the full build-out in phase 3. Next slide. So this is the big slide, the important slide that may shock some people. Right now, we're sitting at an estimated cost of $90 million to complete all this work. Now, that includes the full build-out of the Eastside Employment Lands, and it also includes our portion of the tunnel crossing that we have to pay for as we have some infrastructure in the region's tunnel. Obviously, it's a lot of money, and staff have been working, looking at multiple ways to pay for it, so it's not all just against the levy. The first is grant funding. So currently, we've already received the $1.5 million from SWATF, and that's helping pay for the design of the Eastside Employment Lands. We've recently submitted a application to the province for their HUSIF fund, a housing enabling, and that's for $12 million. And there's also a CHIF application, and that's $1 billion from the feds, again, mostly related to housing. But that's where I think the Eastside Employment Lands project as a whole can be competitive in these grant funding opportunities, because we aren't just enabling housing with our infrastructure, right? We're also enabling industrial development. We're also building resiliency into our infrastructure, and we're enabling the houses. So I think from that aspect, we have a pretty good chance at these applications, so obviously no guarantees. There's a couple other ways we're looking to secure financing for this project. One is a government business enterprise, which is, Brian may need to correct me here, but largely a for-profit corporation owned by the government. So think of the LCBO as one of those, the St. Lawrence Seaway, Ontario Power Generation, Hydro One. Those are all government business enterprises, so we're looking at something like that. And we're also looking at a minimum water and wastewater purchase agreement from Asai. So that's just signing a contract with them, guaranteeing revenue for the city for a period of time, so we have the funding secured for that debt. Next slide. So just quick summary reminder for where we're at and where we're going. We're at about 90% right now, with a tender looking to start or be released in 2025, and construction starting immediately after that. The region's project is planning to be tendered in the spring of 2025, and construction again starting just after that. Next slide, please. So I hope that provides everyone with a decent overview of everything that the region, the city, Asai, BMI, and Associated Engineering are working on. And again, I don't think it can be overstated enough how having one team between all those parties is really helping us with avoiding delays, saving costs, and saving personally me headaches from working with different bodies. Next slide. So just a quick overview of the recommendation. Right now, we are only asking for that design money, not any of the construction money. So we've already secured $1.5 million in SWATF from grants for the design, and we're asking for an additional $3.1 million to build out the all of the Eastside Employment Lands. You will see a report, obviously, pretty soon, considering we're looking to tender in 2025 on the funding of the construction, but that will be at a later time. Next slide, please. And just have the recommendation before you. So something we didn't really talk about in the slides, but just a quick overview on that first point, the Ministry of Environment point. The city's license, water and wastewater license, doesn't currently allow us to have water mains of this size, and I don't think it even includes force mains at all. So we just have to make an amendment to our license to say we would like to be able to own these, mostly just a formality there. And of course, we are asking for the 3.1 million and the approval for the Director of Public Works or Corporate Services to execute the contracts to direct appoint Associated Engineering for the remainder of the East Side Employment Lands design. So that is hopefully everything to give to you today, but happy to answer any questions or direct it to anybody here supporting me.
Great job, Mr. Pilon. We really appreciate this. I mean, being one of the biggest projects in our lifetime within our community, and what it brings, not just with Asai Kasei, but everything else that's going to come around it.
Yeah.
And we know that Mr. Cotton left it through Gary's department on what they're answering calls on a weekly basis with regards to what other lands are available. So I'll go to questions. Questions to staff. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Matt. Very impressive presentation.
Thank you.
Very professional done. You haven't been up here very often, so you did a great job.
Thanks.
I have no problem with the recommendation, approving it. You were the one that brought up the piping underneath the canal for the region. My question is, with that piping, it goes to elite also, the elite development. Would that piping also have the capacity to say, I'm not saying I heard anything, I haven't heard anything, but for a future housing, say on the way to Bethel or something like that, if it just happened to be, like I said, I haven't heard nothing, the secret or nothing.
No worries.
But would that have the capacity to also be, fulfill that, say another 2,000 housing?
So through the mayor to the councillor, the Elite Homes Force Main is dedicated to the Elite Homes development. They have to be sized according to how much flow they're going to receive, otherwise you get into operational issues. That being said, the city is including an additional spare force main in the tunnel crossing. So if you were to see a second Elite Homes or a second massive industrial park, that pipe will be sitting there and connected actually all the way to the region or the treatment plant, just sitting in that tunnel ready for connection. That is currently will not be used for any of the proposed developments.
To you, Mr. Mayor, staff has great foresight, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ditto Councillor Bagu's comments on your presentation. Matt, thank you. Something that popped into my mind while you were doing the presentation is you talked about the existing connection to the east side with respect to its age and vulnerability that we have. Now that we know more about lining than we ever thought we would in our lifetime, given what you guys have been up to, I'm wondering that is there a possibility that, the new line provides us, the way I read things now, with one working line.
Right.
It doesn't provide us with a redundant line.
Correct.
So I got to thinking, is there any possible way, not at this time, but there could be an attempt to reline the old line so it becomes a redundant line?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, it's a good point, and I don't know if Mark may have any other insight on it. The new force main is upsized, correct, compared to the existing one, so there is a bit of a capacity issue there. I don't know the region's plans if they're just planning on decommissioning, but I wonder if it is possible that you could, once it's offline, now reline it, and now that is your spare should anything go wrong. I believe, though, with the upgrades to the east side pumping station, that it wouldn't be a quick, shut it down for 2 hours and swap over.
Right.
There's just a lot of work that goes into the pumping station to make that new connection. But that pipe, it's not getting pulled out of the ground. So maybe there is an opportunity there for at least somebody 60 years, 80 years down the line where it's not even my issue that that pipe could be used. But don't have a definitive answer for you today.
I'm just wondering if you could get back to us with that possibility and what the cost would be and what the cost the region might wish to contribute or have to providing redundancy to the city of Port Colborne. And notwithstanding that it doesn't, wouldn't take the new capacity, because obviously it was undercapacitated for that. But, you know, if a ship or anything ever happened to a brand new line, we'd be back in the same position. And having some capacity would be better than having no capacity. So if you could get back to us on that. The other question I had was with regard to, like this, a lot of this project is going to depend on assistance, grants, and things like that. This may not be a question for you, it may be a question for Mr. Bowles on the financial side. But I get doing the full design, but if money becomes tight, the design for the extension of Ramey Road and the road out to 140, whilst important, could be done secondarily if we're that close. I don't know what savings there would be, but I don't know if we don't get other monies, can that be pulled before the costs of doing it are arrived at?
Sure.
Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to council and the councilor and council. I think before we get into the engineering technical question, just from a funding perspective, I think we all have to be aware that a lot of the funding envelopes right now are around housing. So the reality is, what my expectation would be is that funding grants that we may be able to achieve to make this project work will have a component of increasing the housing options, which means the lines to which you refer, which also help fund the housing or make the housing happen, will most likely need to be part of any grant application. So deferring that design is probably not going to be a route that we'll be able to maneuver with respect to the project, just because a lot of the conversations we're having around grants include improving or increasing the number of housing starts.
Counselor?
If I could, through you to Mr. Bowles, I guess I was concerned that in the 3.1 million, there's road design and road out to the highway, but it's the servicing, to your point, that is, I wouldn't want to delay, because it helps the elite property and others. But I don't know if there was enough savings there in delaying the road design as opposed to the trench down Ramey, but more importantly, the road to 140, which ultimately I guess would be an access for Ashakase as well as the others. So, but just maybe the next and last question I had would also be for Mr. Bowles. So we often hear about how industrial park and industrial DC charges are not applicable to projects. So my concern is that DCs per se on the industrial development aren't going to help fund water and wastewater utilities to the plant and to that corridor. So is it fair to say that we really have to pay for this on utility charges, i.e. water and wastewater, and overall growth in the city as a result of this? So notwithstanding the grants, which will fast forward filling that gap, we're really talking about not development charges per se, but water and wastewater rates that they will pay to help fulfill our commitment.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor and council. Well, I guess we lost the presentation, but that's okay. In the presentation, we did have a slide that breaks out key grants that we're working with different agencies, different government groups on. It also laid out the concept of maybe, I'll use the word, establishing a district to which we would establish the rate, and we would work to isolate the cost of this project in that district, because I think it's going to be a complicated scenario if we move forward and we have to start moving the cost of this project onto the current water and wastewater payers within the city. So the project that we have on the go right now is to try to isolate these costs, so that way the new companies, industry that comes on will ultimately be the payers. The city may have to back the debt, but ultimately the cost of that debt will be paid by those that come on to that water pipe, plus grants that we continue to work through, which is why we've only asked as staff for approval for the design, because to move forward with the final construction approval, I think some of that grant work needs to be continue to move forward.
Counselor?
I've always liked the idea of the district because it takes any commingling or any issue that the existing water and wastewater ratepayers at Port Colborne will not be contributing to that whole construction cost for that utility. And by isolating it, I think there's a clear line in a revenue expense line that can always be shown that Port Colborne ratepayers on water and wastewater are not funding this. So, yeah, I look forward to more detail on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor. Just so Council knows, the pipe that we're talking about, which all the pipes go across around the Clarence Street Bridge, because the original water plant was Byral Public Works Building, and the original sewer plant was near, what was actually just north of the old Kentucky Fried Chicken, that vacant lot that the Port Colborne Marine uses. So that's why it goes 1965, folks. That pipe is 1965. And Councillor Bruno, Councillor Bagu, myself, Mr. Long, CAO Louis were all in Calgary the day we landed. It was the day the big water main broke, and they were without water for a long time. So it was pretty dicey when we were there with a lot of the neighborhoods on water. So, you know, it's easy to fix that one. Ours, you can't drill under the canal in a few days to put a new pipe in. So, I mean, this project has been in the books, and both Councillor Davies and I have been working on it, and previously to that, Councillor Butters, to get this moved forward, because Region was looking at bringing this in around 2028. We said, no, this has got to go a lot sooner, because we can't cross our fingers and hope that the line doesn't A, break, and B, stops development because we have no capacity. And it's not just a leak. There's all kinds of other subdivisions that we're dealing with, and apartment buildings, and just, you know, the general uptake in housing and even the existing units on the east side of Port Colborne, where, you know, they may add another living unit to it, so that adds capacity. So this just sets us up for a long time in the future. So just want to make sure you guys knew the context of, you know, yeah, it's not broken today, but I wouldn't want to wake up tomorrow and it is broken. I mean, that's the issue. I got Councillor Beauregard, then Councillor Aquilina.
Yeah. Through your worship to Matthew, excellent presentation. Just two questions, one to you and probably one to Director Bowles. You mentioned there being like a slight delay in the phase one. Is that just in design? Are you able to just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So through the mayor to the councillor, we added some scope to the project. Originally, Progress Drive South was not going to be serviced. So it made sense that if you got a good idea of an overview of the city, the original alignment of the water main was going to go west. So you go up to 140 west on 2nd Concession, you go up the rail line, and that's a more direct connection to Progress Drive North. Then we added the section of Progress Drive South. So now you're doubling back. right? So now it actually makes sense to just send the water main up the 140, go all the way up Progress Drive South into North, and you eliminate that section along the rail line. So that's going to take a little bit of effort to do, topo, geotechnical, all that to get that drawn. But at the end of the day, it is a pipe in the ground down the edge of the road allowance. The biggest hassle we're going to have is just getting the MTO to approve it. Other than that, it's so it is a little bit of work to add that design, but it's going to save significant cost in construction by eliminating, I don't have the exact number, I'm going to say less or more than 800 meters of pipe and putting it on the 140 instead.
And through you, just wondering what's the estimated delay time for that?
Through the mayor, to the councillor, we're still working through some options here because we already have all of Progress Drive North at the 90% design stage. So I don't see a reason why we can't tell the contractor, hey, go start on Progress Drive North. Give us 2-3 months to do the design on the 140 because they're going to be on Progress Drive for a long time anyway. So I don't want to say we'll see no delay, but I'm not expecting it to be more than a month or two, so long as we, like I said, if we can award the work that's on Progress Drive already, and then have the contractor come back and do that work on the 140 afterwards.
Thank you. And on this, my second question to you, Director Bowles, through you. This is the first time I've heard of the government business entity, I believe, being kind of thrown out there in terms of, I think that's what it's called, am I right? Is it GBE? Just wondering if you can expand on exactly like what that is and how that will play in the future here.
Through the mayor to the councillor and council. So if we do go down that road, there will be additional reporting to council with respect to how we do with GBE. We will have to have a public information session on it. Think of it as a hydro. It would basically be that the city would be reestablishing the equivalent of a hydro, and through that organization we would establish a board. They would ensure that the billing set covered off the costs. Any distributions would come back to the city, could be reinvested in the water and wastewater program as council desired. And the debt would be isolated within that GBE, within that corporation. There is a lot of work to get there. We are working with a subject matter expert. I am repeating, I guess, what the subject matter expert has told me, and if there is any changes along the way, we'll come back to council and tell you that and have that discussion. But ultimately, the goal is, when you establish this, is you are able to isolate, as Councillor Bruno, I think, asked the question earlier, the costs, the revenues. It's very clear to be able to see it, and we're able to, and other municipalities have done this, issued the debt through this. So another way to look at this is, because the debt is isolated in this type of corporation, if we are able to go forward with it, it basically means that we don't use up our city debt capacity. And that's what's really important here, because if we can do this in this GBE, which we're trying to make work for council to take a look at in more detail in the new year, then, and if we can preserve the city's debt capacity, I know Councillor Elliott's questioned many times, what's the rule? When do we issue debt on what projects? And we talk about doing it for large projects. So with our debt capacity with the city, we want to use it to fix our current system. And we want to be able to fix the current system because we talked at the last rate budget. We fix the current system, we can affect our storm sewers, we can affect our wastewater rates, and hopefully we can stop these increases going forward at the same rate that they're at. So I don't know if that's a high level of what the GBE is. In 2025, there will be a report. We will have a subject matter expert come in, report. You'll be able to ask lots of questions about it and how that would work, and we'll continue the consultation process. And ultimately, it'll be a decision of council, and we'll definitely get some public input along the way on it.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing that report when it comes in. It seems like an interesting method, and yeah, I look forward to it.
Niagara Regional Broadband, which we're 1/4 owner, that was the latest one that we were part of, which was a GBE, which Councillor Bruno and I fell into at FCM, and Alberta a long time ago. But getting involved in that, it's true, what we were able to do there, and it didn't affect our debt limit here. And then at the end of the day, our initial costs that went into NRBN, we got back in dividends, and then we sold it and received about 8 million, Gary?
7.3.
About 7.3 million. So really, it didn't cost anything because we got our initial money back through dividends, then we sold it for 7.3 million. So the city made lots of money on that. Like that's how these things can work. Now this is a little bit different because you're selling water. You're probably not going to sell that off eventually, but it does affect everything else that we do here in the municipality. So, Councillor Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to you. And I don't know if this is too preliminary, but I was looking to see when we anticipate we might start on the tunnel project, and then what's the duration?
Through the mayor to the councillor, the tender for that construction is in spring of 2025, but it's not just the tunnel crossing. So they actually also have to build the new force main from the east side pumping station at the corner of Kalali and Welland, and that's got to go all the way up past Main Street onto Barber Drive, and then get underneath the canal. And then as part of that, they also have to get the water main to the water tower on Barrack Road and get all those force mains to the treatment plant just to the south. So we don't have confirmation on how that project will be phased, whether or not they're going to start the tunnel right away or whether they're going to start with that linear works right away. Maybe it's a twofold because they would be different contractors anyways. So I think confidently you could say that construction on the project as a whole would start by the end of summer 2025. But on which specific component, we don't have confirmation yet.
Councillor?
And is there a deadline of when it needs to be completed for Asahi Kase to move forward?
Yes, so through the mayor to the councillor, Q3 2027, that's when they need our wastewater online. So it's going to take us about a year, call it 13 months, or 13 or 14 months for the water, the pump stations and all that tunneling. The construction timelines look good. Like we're confident we can meet Q3 2027, and that's the commitment we've gave to them.
Okay, Council. Further questions? Just a couple, Brian, through you, only because you're the financial guy. With regards to Elite, they will be putting in capital dollars once they decide to start with regards to what's going from second concession south down Elizabeth, correct?
Through the mayor to the mayor, I always get stumped on that one.
Just answer the question.
So I think what's important to know is when we get to the elite development, those 2,200 units would all be subject to the development charges, and those development charges will range anywhere between, I'm going to say, $18,000 to $30,000 a unit. So you times that by the 2,200. Those funds will ultimately fund some of that construction that will come in. So there is, in addition to what was put up there, there are other avenues for the city to safeguards for the city to be able to recover the costs for this project.
And then the 1,000 acres that are in our industrial employment lands, some of those we own, some of the federal government owns, some of the province owns, and the others are privately owned by individuals or companies. Again, as new companies come in and build in those, they will contribute towards the pipe that goes up through there, correct?
Yeah, I agree. So all the new construction that will happen, and what we're trying to structure the whole model is that with the current companies going in there, they will be able to fund most of the pipe. So then when you add on that other 1,000 acres that the mayor references, that is then going to be able to provide that cushion, that surplus within that entity to ensure its financial sustainability and allow for future reinvestment in water and wastewater infrastructure across the city. So they will be able to 100% contribute. So as we add businesses, there'll be additional dollars to be able to contribute and grow that infrastructure.
Great. And my final question, I don't know if Joe or Matt can answer this. We won't say the name of the company, but there is an existing company that is looking to get involved with the sewer line, a new sewer line for them that you guys have been discussing. Is that moved any further?
Through the mayor, to the mayor. Not that I'm aware of. We haven't had discussions at this time that I'm aware of. But I would like to take the opportunity to thank Matt and Mark Belanger for coming, and also a big thank you to our leadership team. We've been working pretty tough. Like, it's been a tough go for a long time. We still have a long way to go. But thanks to everyone here to support us. It's been a lot of work, and I just want to say thank you to everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. Further questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Let's carry unanimously. Thank you, council. Another check in the box of this great announcement that started last May. And yes, you guys and we all have been working very hard on this project. Thank you. Next is item 14.2, billing of the Zavitz Municipal Drain 2024-194, moved by Councillor Bodner, second by Councillor Aquilina. The Public Works Department Report 2024-194 be received. That the Zavitz Drain Levy bylaw be approved to allow for the billing of the Zavitz Municipal Drain and associated branch drains as outlined in Appendix B of Public Works Department Report 2024-194. Councillor Bodner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see our drainage superintendent here. I have some questions for her and then also some questions for Mr. Bowles. So,
Podium, okay. If you want to sit down, you can sit where staff sits if you want. Next to Joe there. Well, it's just, I think it's easier. Standing. Thanks, Lana.
Alana, so we've got this drain we're going to bill out. I wonder if you can give us a little bit of the Coles notes of how we got here, because I think this drain started to be talked about 2010 or something like that. It's been quite a while, but how can we actually start to build this now when we weren't billing it 5 years ago or whatever? So, anyways, can you just give us, like, I guess what I'm saying it isn't our fault. So tell us why it isn't our fault of billing, if you could, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. Yes, so this project started, it's a Fort Erie project, and Fort Erie initiated that in 2010 when they appointed an engineering firm to complete a new report. I'm sorry, I don't have my notes with me. I believe it was 2016 that the report was presented to council, preliminary adopted, or adopted rather. Past that, 2017 construction began. It was end of 2017, beginning of 2019, the construction finished. And Fort Erie went through a changeover in staff and weren't able to do their billing, I'm guessing, but it's taken up until September of this year for them to finally bill the city of Port Colborne for the city of Port Colborne and all of the residents in Port Colborne share. So at this point, we are now billing the residents that are affected, and we will have our share to pay as well.
Because those questions are probably going to come to at least Councillor Aguilina, myself, and maybe some other councillors, that how can you bill us for something that happened quite a while ago? So that's the explanation. Now, so this is part you and part Mr. Bowles, I think, because now we come to how are we going to build this drain? So we have a postal strike, so we can't send out the bills. I know water bills are being walked around by our staff. When you get into Ward 4, we got a ton of lock boxes that you can't get into. And I wouldn't want to put Elena in the spot if you're going to be the one peddling those around. Because we have to campaign in Ward 4, and you got a lot of dog biscuits in your pockets to get by some of those big dogs. So I don't think that's even a thing to go up to somebody's house. And I think the worst thing that is in there, if you've noticed, is that we're asking people to pay by December 31st. So, Merry Christmas. Here's your bill from 2000 and whatever. And some of those are hefty bills, if you look in there. So I guess I'll let Alana off the hook and just go to Mr. Bowles and wonder if we can extend that December 31st period to maybe get that postal strike over and all the big backlogs and everything. And I'll wait to see what Mr. Bowles comes up with.
Mr. Bowles.
Through the mayor to the councilor and council, I don't always get a heads up, but the councilor did call me and give me some time to work through with my staff today and team. We do have a recommendation for council. We would recommend that and I guess we'll ask the clerk how to adjust this because it's in the report, but to have approval to extend that date to April 30th, 2025 to be able to move forward.
Yeah, I can have Councillor Bodner and Aquilina move an amendment to accept that recommendation from staff. So
yeah,
if that's what you want to put forward and if it's okay with the two movers and seconders, we can do that. You want to ask that question?
Sorry, through you,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, to Director Bowles. The wording in the bylaws, so it just says the full payments not received by December 30th, which we will change to April 30th of 2024, shall be added to the final tax bill beginning in 2025. Is that still accurate and ending in the year 2029?
Yeah, so through the mayor to the clerk on this one, yes, so what will happen is individuals will have until April 30th to pay the bill or notify our team to set up the payment over the 5-year period. And if they don't do that by April 30th, on the final tax bill that comes out June, July period, we will attach the final billing to that final tax bill.
Yep. Yeah, so I've got Councillor Bodner and Councillor Aquilina to move the amendment, basically to extend this to April the 30th, 2025 for payment and or set up a payment plan with our staff.
Yep.
Council understand that? Any questions on the amendment? All in favor? That's carried. Councillor?
I think that's a reasonable length of time, and thanks for figuring that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Councillor Aquilina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Alana. First of all, thank you, Councillor Bodner, for bringing this forward. But I was thinking, because Fort Erie initiated the work on this drain, and I'm thinking the bulk of the drain is in the Fort Erie boundary. Is that correct? No? Okay, so I wasn't sure if moving forward, like if we are still doing maintenance on it, or is Fort Erie doing the maintenance on the drain going forward?
Lana?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Fort Erie does maintenance on their drains, but they tender their work. Because we don't necessarily do a formal tender and we have equipment in-house, they have spoken to me about doing the work for them. We are actually looking at doing maintenance this year, 2025. There have been a couple of requests from residents. The downside of that is with this construction billing, there will be a maintenance billing in 2026 then. So it's not necessarily nice what we're doing, but it has been long enough that the maintenance is required again.
Okay, Councillor Borgard?
Through your worship, I'm just to Director Bowles. Will there be interest accruing on this bill then?
Through the mayor to the councillor, we'll issue the bill as of now with the payment terms, so there won't be any interest. So when residents do receive the notice, they may see a bill date of today, but because of the mail situation, they may not get it for some period of time, but that's why we've done the extended bill period. But to avoid the system charging interest, we will issue the bill and notice as of right now. So there's no interest that will be charged.
Okay. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you. Through you to Alana. So we've had our own skeletons in our own backyard when it's gone to delayed like works to billing. In the case with Fort Erie, receiving this bill late, so the costs of the drain finishing in 2019 were X. They didn't bill us. Is Fort Erie, they're not charging us from 2019 to now interest on that works, or is interest charged automatically as a cost of the whole drain, so that the bill, much like we heard on another one, had to get paid for? What's the situation with that cost of the drain in 2019? Is that the cost that's proportionally being now assessed to our ratepayers, the people on the drain? Or is it that cost plus the interest to the time of billing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, Fort Erie doesn't charge interest. That's relatively new to the city of Port Colborne that we do charge interest, but there is no interest at all charged on this particular project.
Great. Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, so we have a motion that has been amended, so voting on the amended motion, all in favor, and that's carried. Item 14.3 is recommendation report to remove the property 202 Main Street West from the Heritage Register 2024-193, moved by Councilors Danch and Bruno, that Development and Government Relations Department Report 2024-193 be received, that Council approve the recommendation of the Heritage Subcommittee to remove 202 Main Street West from the Heritage Register. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, first of all, I am in agreement with it. I have no problem with it, but just the way the report is on the background, it on the second page it says at least September 2024 our request was received from an investor who is interested in purchasing 202 Main Street West and requested that the property be removed from the Heritage Register. So my question is, we did all this because somebody that might buy some property wanted it, or did we do it because the owner of the property wanted it to be done?
Mr. Schultz.
Through the mayor, I know the investor group and the owner have been working together on that. So the request did come in, and our Heritage Committee did want to look at it, just based on, even if it is another company that comes in and wants to purchase it, is there merit in designating this property? Probably not. So the intention was just to get out of it.
To you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just the way it sounds like somebody walked into City Hall, say, hey, I might want to buy this property. Can you guys get it next? So I just wanted to clarify that with you. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
Councillor, do you want us to call you to see if there's any artifacts in there you may want? when they tear it down, since you were.
I remember walking in there
involved in
with
that,
when my
that
grandfather owned it, when I was 6 or 7, every Sunday we went there under the benches looking for change, and we always got a lot of change, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Item 14.4, 2023 Consolidated Financial Statements, 2024-223. Moved by Councilors Bodnar and Elliott, the Corporate Services Department Report 2024-223 be received, and that the reserve transfers proposed in this report and included in the consolidated financial statements be approved, that the consolidated financial statements in Appendix A of Corporate Services Report 2024-223 be approved, and that the auditors of Doan, Grant, Thornton be appointed, the auditors for the city and related boards and agencies for the 2024 and 2025 year ends. And just before I go to Councillor Bruno, 13.4A, 13.4, no, sorry, 13.3E. 13.3E. It's just in your in the recommendation here, guys. It's got Don, D-O-N-N-E. Is it not D-O-A-N-E? Doan Raymond? Used to be Doan Raymond. Now it's Doan Grant Thornton, or is it Don? I thought it went back to Doan. D-O-A-N-E, which is we used to be. Yeah, like history goes, it was Peters Brown, Doan Raymond, Grant Thornton. Now it's Doan Grant Thornton.
I think it's a whole new company.
Is Don the new company? Anyways, if it is different, can we make sure that gets changed? Only because I know our auditor, and I'm sure he told me it was going to be Doan Grant Thornton. So bringing the old name back, that's what tweaked me here looking at it. So anyways, if it needs to be changed, guys, the clerk will change the spelling. They'll fix it, just in case. Councillor Bruno, you had a question on this?
Yes, thank you, Worship. In those consolidated statements, it talks about the division of what is the city of Port Colborne, and then there's trusteeships, and there are various entities at library that has an audit that's all encompassing. So one of the ones is South Coast. And so we've heard from residents, and I think it was Councillor Elliott maybe that had raised last week about the proceeds from South Coast and the new proceeds that might be coming from South Coast when we get the MAT tax in. And so the fact that we had auditing expenses for South Coast, my question is, do the members of South Coast share in that payment? Or is it just that Port Colborne is paying it because it comes to somebody and then is redivided? Or I know there was some inactivity in that by other members. So I was just wondering, both now, and I guess I should ask the question going forward, when there's actively expenses and others are contributing, what will that split entail, or will it change?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor, to the councilor and council. So the Niagara South Coast was really re-established coming out of COVID. Council, I think the council previous to this will, and some councilors that were on both will know that it was really reinitiated because there was a number of grants that came out. And when the grants came out, I think the initial grant that the Niagara South Coast got was almost $500,000 to reinvigorate tourism across Welland, Waynfleet, Fort Erie, Pelham, and Port Colborne. And at that point in time, everybody shared in the cost because the grant was able to fund the costs and go forward. And then I think we've had some conversation about the history of Niagara South Coast, where it's had kind of its everybody's in, and then there's slow down periods. So the following couple of years, there really wasn't a lot of, I think, activity. And on a financial perspective, there was a sharing of information amongst municipalities. The City of Port Colborne has kept the corporation alive, recognizing that we had the municipal accommodation tax coming forward. and working on the collaborative benefit, trying to get other municipalities to join in. So for the last couple of years, as that process has been going on, the Niagara South Coast has been funded either through the municipal accommodation tax of Port Colborne or the contribution that the city has given from the levy to Niagara South Coast. Now in 2025, the Niagara South Coast is funded from the MAT tax, from the municipal accommodation tax, so that will fund that. We are still in that, and there was a meeting of the municipalities today, I believe, and I think our acting CEO can confirm that with me. And that is where we're trying to work out what those financial commitments are going to be. Those financial commitments, at this point in time, I'm not going to suggest are going to be on an equalized basis. It will be Port Colborne's corporation, I think, for the period of time. As we move forward, I think the goal is, and the goal that council gave to the Niagara South Coast Board was to move it to a full-fledged, all municipalities in on equals. But that is not necessarily there at this point in time, although moving towards it, we hope, cautiously optimistic, we get there. The corporation does have a setup where membership can be done in such a way that the corporation can be maintained by the City of Port Colborne, and our municipal partners can join in through a second type of, I guess, share membership. From a technical perspective, maybe getting a little too technical in your answer. So I think I guess what I would just highlight is there will be some contribution. It's not on an equalized basis, because I think the City of Port Colborne, with the guidance that we were given, was to get everybody on an equalized basis if there's a desire to do so with the other municipalities. And that process continues to unfold, and the conversations are very genuine and very productive up to now. And we'll continue to, I think, update council as we move forward. There is, and we have committed to having a presentation to council in the new year. But for all intents and purposes, I think council should still consider Niagara South Coast as, for the most part, their corporation, and expect that that would be the audit fee to which it's being covered. But as we work with partnering municipalities, that may change and contribution may come from those municipalities. But the financial contribution from other municipalities is a very new concept, and we'll be presenting that in the new year. But I think it's very encouraging that the other municipalities have come on and are working in such a diligent manner with the Niagara South Coast. So I do give Greg, our coordinator of tourism, a lot of credit for bringing everybody together.
Councillor?
Great. The other reason I brought this up, and Councillor Bodnar will know as well, our airport commission, of which there's 4 municipalities, the audit fees are paid by the airport commission and corporation, as opposed to being paid by the respective ownership. So I don't know if this funding for that going forward is a reimbursement, or until there's more members, it will be funded out of city funds or out of funds held in South Coast to pay back the city, who has to have that report to do its consolidated statements.
Mr. Bowles?
I think I guess I'll just maybe try to rephrase. So as we move into the 2025 budget, tax dollars aren't being used to fund the Niagara South Coast. So it is being funded by the municipal accommodation tax. Obviously, it's our first year, so we're doing the best to guess how the revenue, and there's going to be that if somebody's already booked, they may not necessarily be subject to it. So that process, the first year there'll be a hiccup, but going forward, we do anticipate that all the expenses of the Niagara South Coast are funded on the municipal accommodation, plus any other cooperative agreements that we can do with neighboring municipalities. So I think the important point is it's not on the tax levy. That audit fee is not paid by the tax levy.
Counselor?
Great, thank you.
Okay, further questions? Counselor Aquilina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Bowles. I just wanted to know under the airport consolidation, what that dollar amounts for.
Bowles?
Yeah, so through the mayor to the councillor, so we don't have the airport's entries when we talk to you about the financial statements or the budget, so that consolidation entry at the end is just, that's us taking the statements and recording their surplus deficit, kind of their adjustment that we work with the auditors to record. So that's all that is. And the other two columns is just, you can look at the reclassification, and when we report in the financial statements, there's a slight differential in how we report it. So we'll just confer the two to the exact same model. And on the adjustment column, just full transparency. So when we reported to council, we were then finishing the financial statements. Public Works was fantastic, closed out a little bit more, got a couple more expenses in, so we just had to put them into the system.
Okay, further questions? So, thank God for technology. It should read Doane, D-O-A-N-E, Grant Thornton LLP, be appointed as our auditors, just so that everybody knows that. Typo there. Counselor?
Through your worship, I just had a question. In reading Appendix C, there's a mention of there being some concern regarding deficiencies in internal control. I guess they raised that as a potential concern. I just want to know if you can address it maybe. I do see your response in here, management's response, but it's in regards to journal entries.
Yeah, so through the mayor to the councillor, we've had a recurring, I guess, well, that audit note has been recurring for years at the city, and it really stems around how our accounting system flows through the journal entries. So our compensating control, and we document that, is that on a quarterly basis, we print off all the journal entries, the manual journal entries, and we do review them as a group to make sure that any journal, like there's no journal entry that wasn't approved within the system, because the concern is that, for example, I could go in and just do a journal entry. So what we do is we print off all the journal entries, and we have multiple people in the city review them and then sign off to make sure that no journal entry was made by any individual as a single unit without a second person sign off. So we do have a manual process. The auditors would prefer it to be all automated. In the new system, we'll be able to automate it.
Okay. All right, no further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Item 14.5, City of Thorold City Council Statement respecting flag desecration. If I could have Councilors Bodner and Begg, you move that the council endorse the City of Thorold's resolution regarding the City Council Statement respecting flag desecration. Councilor Bodner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bring this up because I see in there it says to endorse it, but is that the strongest support we can give? Is that, like, this is pretty serious, and I'd certainly like us to do whatever we can to support this. And is there anything above endorsing it? I don't know.
Well, I think that's what they're asking for, is that we actually, we're going to endorse what they've done here in their resolution, and that we support this. If you want to add the word support, endorse and support the City of Thorold.
I guess, and what do we do? Send something to Thorold saying that
That's
we
right.
do?
And then item number 2 of their now therefore it be resolved is that it does go to the Office of the Prime Minister, the Office of the Member of Parliament for Niagara Centre, Regional Municipality of Niagara, and all lower tier municipalities. So our clerk's office will circulate our support for this to those entities as well. So instead of us doing, we could take the same thing and do it here, but they've already invented the wheel, so we can support this, and we're agreeing to everything in it under their whereases and therefores.
Sure, I just want to make sure we didn't, somehow miss telling everybody that we're in support of this?
Yeah, no. So,
Okay, great.
Yeah, endorse,
Thank
support, either words, but
Yep.
you're fine.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So typically what we do when council decides to support any type of correspondence is we write a letter that essentially says that on this dated meeting, council passed the following motion, and it's the exact motion as outlined in the correspondence letter, and then we distribute it to everybody that municipality distributed it to, so that they can see that all of the municipalities that have gained support for it. So, yeah.
Okay, further questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Motions, there are none. Any notices of motion? Oh, he did. I apologize, Councillor, you did. I wrote that down on a previous page, and I already, 13.4B, let me go back to that one. 13.4B. Okay, do you want me to read this out, Councillor? Or, well, just, I mean, I can read the whole thing, but you're asking us to support this, correct?
Yeah, I would just like to speak to it a little bit and just,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's essentially what I would be doing.
To support, okay, so if I could have Councillors Beauregard and Elliott move that we support the resolution from the Corporation of the Township of McGarry. Councillor Beauregard.
Yeah, through your worship, just in reading this, I think it's a great way to do is exactly what it says, to have predictable funding, and where the growth assessment hasn't really been taking place since 2016. That was the last, I believe, assessment, and where we don't have the ability to tax like the provincial and federal governments. Land is essentially where we get our money from, so I think these are methods that provide predictable funding that is associated with land and can help local municipalities deal with some of the cost in infrastructure and just the high cost in operating generally. So I think this is something that we should support as a community and hope to get a response back.
Great, thank you. Anything further from any other councillor? And I know Councillor Elliott, who was at AMO this year and had meetings with the province, but through good roads with our meetings with the province that Mr. Long has set up for us. This is one thing that we've been pressing provincially, and then also with our Member of Parliament, Mr. Badaway, federally, with regards to similar to what they've done with the gas tax and how we can spend that we've advocated for consistent funding for our infrastructure. So not just water sewers, but water sewer buildings, but it's consistent every year, so that it allows us to go out, and we may have to borrow money for it, but it allows us to help fund that debt, or it actually goes into paying for that infrastructure within the municipality. So although we're always throwing the fishing line out with an ask for a grant or anything like that, you're not always going to catch anything. There is an announcement coming up that we did catch one, but you'll hear about that tomorrow. I can't say anything about it today, but it's actually pretty good for the city. But those are a crapshoot, quite frankly. We put staff here puts these applications in, and we don't always get it, something that we need. So I agree with you, Councillor, that we do need consistent funding both from the federal and provincial governments, specifically on infrastructure. So I appreciate you bringing that forward. That being said, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, so, before we get into the last part of our public meeting here, guys, the way we're trying to, with the clerk's office, move the agenda, there are consent agenda items. So you know how the clerk's department asks you to put in what you may want to speak on? What I can do is I can, like in 13 point, sorry, Just got kicked out, sorry. So we have our consent agenda. So instead of actually pulling them out and then going to them separately, I can go to them individually. Like, we can still move them as a group, even if there's amendments, but I can go to each one and say, is there any questions? So Councillor Bodnar could say, yes, I have a question on this item here, and we could do it. Then we could just pass them in bulk. It can move things along a lot quicker, something we do at the region. There are certain things that we do have to pull out separately, depending on the meetings. So as we move forward to streamline things, just so we can move along quicker, it doesn't stop any debate, it doesn't stop anything from amendments, but it's just that sometimes four items are pulled, all you do is have questions on it. There's no changes or anything. You just may want clarification, so it just moves things along. Councillor?
I kind of like tonight where you actually brought out ahead of time before we had to speak, so we don't have to keep our eye on, did clerks get to you and do you have, so that was great.
Yes.
I didn't know what you're saying. Are you saying, though, that you'd be reading out all items, so unlifted items, you would still mention it, and we'd have to say...
No, so tonight we had 4 items, and then we had an additional item, which can happen at any time, but, if Councillor Beauregard didn't have time to call the clerk, he knows that he can come here. So I would say, we have, under the consent agenda, grouping 13.1A through E. Does anybody have any questions on any of these?
I see.
And you'd say, yeah, on item C, Mr. Bowles, line 5, what does that mean? And that's the only question on it. And then another councillor may have a question on item E. Now, if there's a change to it, what we'll do is we'll pull that item, we'll read the recommendation to get it on the floor to make any amendments. But if nobody has any amendments, you get your questions answered, then we just pass them in bulk. It does move things a lot quicker. It's just streamlines. But it doesn't stop any debate or questions, or because a lot of times you guys, all you have is a quick question, and instead of reading out the whole thing all the time, it does move things quicker. That's all.
So if you had advanced lifted it, I like this idea that you could join in at any time. You didn't have time to send it in.
That's right.
But if you advanced lifted it, you may have a question, but the answer to the question may determine whether you're going to make a motion about it.
Yeah, but then what I would do, exactly, and that happens at regional council where you ask a question and all of a sudden Councillor Elliott goes, well, I think I want to change something here. And he could put his hand up and say, I have an amendment. We deal with the amendment, but I would actually put the motion on the floor then. Instead of putting the motions on the floor all the time, you don't need to do that. We can move them in bulk because you may have a question. Then if there's a change that you want to make as a council, I would put the motion on the floor with a mover and a seconder, and then you put your amendments forward or major changes forward. We debate that and we vote on it and we can move on. But if it's just a simple question, a couple of these, that's all. But still do what you're doing, because we'll keep streamlining it as we move along, because it's going to take time for everybody to get a hold of it. Yes, Councillor.
So just so I'm clear, you still want us to notify the clerk?
Yeah, because it's easier for me, because I can say, as I said, for items 13.1, I go, I'm going to put these on in bulk A through E, but I have Councillor Bodnar on A, I have Councillor Bruno on B, I have Councillor Danch on D, and that's it. And I can go to A, and you have your question. And if all it is a question, there's nothing more, then you get your question answered, then I go to the next councillor on the next item, the next councillor on the next item.
Sure. So I think it's important that we let the clerk know, because
it's easier to run a meeting. Yeah.
I would assume that when I pulled a drainage report, I talked to Alana and said I want her to be here, but does the clerk contact her? Because I'm not sure those questions would have been answered that I said.
Well, I don't think you change anything to what you're doing, because if you ask her, or you could ask the clerk to make sure pertinent staff that you want here. Anytime you guys want staff that's normally not here, like the librarian or Stephanie at the museum, just let the clerk's office know and they'll make sure that those staff are here. But those questions you had for Alana, we didn't really need to read out the whole thing, because you can just say, Alana, on this item, these are the questions I have. Now, other counselors can jump in. That happens, so Counselor Aquilina didn't say she wanted to speak on it beforehand, but she jumped in, asked her questions, so, yeah. Is that all right? Go ahead.
Well, just from your last comment, I was also concerned about what about the people watching? They won't, like you said, it. I think your comment was, no need to read it all out, but if you're at home.
Well, I would read out the top of it. So if you said you wanted to, I don't know, let me just pick one here. Well, the one Councillor Bodnar brought forward, 13.3A, I would read out the billing of the Zavitz municipal drain.
Okay.
2024-194. Councillor Bodnar would then go to Councillor staff, and anybody else wanted to jump in after that, you jump in. Yeah. Well, I don't need to read out everything. One set of mover and seconder, and then we move on. Yeah. Yeah, just it moves quicker. But there are certain items that the clerk brings forward that we actually have to go through the whole procedure. But there are other items you don't have to. Because there may be things, like you may have the whole 13.1, 5 items, and nobody has a question on it. So let's just do them in block, as opposed to bringing them up separately. So, okay? So we'll keep continuing working with our great clerks department on this stuff. All right? Motions, there are none. Notice of motions. Any notices of motion? There are none. Staff remarks. Acting CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Steele. Just a couple of updates. Just on the Chestnut Park Affordable Housing Project, I've been informed by the project manager that the project is on track for completion in late January, with occupancy expected in early March. So great news for our community. Second update is regarding the King Street, Haney Street Affordable Housing Project. This project is still active to the extent that city staff and Niagara Regional housing staff have been chatting regularly over the last year or so on planning issues, environmental remediation, parking issues, how many units could fit on the development parcel. We believe that there is enough land there for 50 to 55 units, which again would be great for our community. The project has not been able to proceed because of lack of funding. That being said, we are anticipating some positive news in the near future. So stay tuned, and we need some seed capital to help that project move forward. So stay tuned. Finally, Mayor Steele, just wanted to mention that the Rural Ontario Municipal Conference, the ROMA Conference, is happening in Toronto in mid-January. Councillors Aquilina and Hoyle attended the 2024 conference. Neither councillor is available to attend the 2025. Councillor, we'd love to have more council representation at that conference. The city will be sending a delegation to Roma. We have already submitted several ministerial meeting requests, which are due tomorrow, so they've already been sent in. So would love to have more council participation.
Hosted where this year?
It's in Toronto.
In Toronto, okay. All right, council, if everyone wants to go to Roma, let
Thank you.
Mr. Long know, please. Councillor?
I through you, Mr. Mayor, to the acting CAO. I think it's great because that was the thing I think that was missing last year, was that we didn't have any ministerial delegations at that conference, which, would have been nice to participate in. So I'm very happy that that's happening this time. So.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, anything this evening?
Nope, nothing this evening.
Joe, Public Works. Nothing? Mr. Bowles? Mr. Schultz? Okay. Councillor's remarks. Councillor Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to touch upon a couple things that you mentioned in your remarks. So one, congratulations again to Grace Church with their groundbreaking. It's been long overdue. And as the council rep for Friends of Roselon that put on the Christmas market at Roselon on the weekend, I just wanted to extend big thank you to museum staff and all the board and volunteers that participated in the market. It was a great day.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Borgard? Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of thank yous. Public Works, I think I brought up last meeting regarding the three-way stop at the corner of West and Victoria there, near the new apartment building, about some people not stopping, and there's some new stop signs there, Mr. Mayor, and our staff put up a few little low blinking red lights, and whether they're there for a couple months, it's fine, but people are getting the hint, and I did have a big thank you from the resident there, and they did say that it is working, so thanks again. And I drove by Tennessee Avenue gates a couple of days ago, and it looks like they're almost done, Mr. Mayor, and looking forward to seeing all the tarps removed. And I stopped, and I actually got a look at the guys who were working there on a Sunday, I think, even. And I did thank them, and they did an excellent job so far, Mr. Mayor. And our Director of Library Services and CEO is Rachel Tkachuk, was going to be here tonight for a staff report, Mr. Mayor, but she unfortunately couldn't make it. So she asked me if I could just bring council up to date on a few things. The roof repairs are almost done, and staff has been great for Public Works in the coordination. They've had a few hiccups there. We had to close our kids' room off a little bit, Mr. Mayor, in the computer room, but we did have a computer for the public to use. And staff and the workers have been getting along really great, and said our staff at Public Works have been great with everybody and the contractors, and looking forward to very, very soon, pending weather, Mr. Mayor, the whole thing is going to be completed, and that would cap off. There are 6 capital projects for this year that will complete it all, so they'll have all 6 completed 2024, which is very good. And 2025 capital project has already started, Mr. Mayor, and probably by spring that will be over also. And there is one real big announcement for the library, Mr. Mayor, but I told Mr. Chuck I didn't want to spoil her thunder, and I asked her to bring that forward to council in the December meeting, Mr. Mayor. So once again, thank you to staff for making everything really smooth for us.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Yes, Your Worship, just one. I had a concern expressed by a member of who lives in Westport Gardens. So as we know, the city's tree canopy program, they've been going around with a certain number of trees this year to fulfill the fulfillment of this year's supply. In Roshmansky Park, as you all probably know, there is a mound that's often used by tobogganers, children in the winter months when there's snow or ice. The concern was that some of these trees were planted in the flight path of potential toboggans. So, however, I went over there myself and looked at it, and the obvious one that you see from West Side Road has quite a run until you get to the sidewalk there on West Side Road. But I think the concern is there's more than one side of a mound. And if you look at the sides and the back facing the subdivision street there, could be little tykes going down a shallower slope, but the trees are there. And so, Joe, I don't know if you could, this just happened the other day, so I didn't get a chance to get it over to you guys, but if you could do a walkabout over there and see, I noticed it just from my vehicle, certainly on the back street there. That may be, I wasn't able to get back to the individual what he is referring to, but there might have to be some that need to be replanted. I will note that in the ward, and I know Councillor Danch has had this too, that I think in hindsight, next year we'll have a better communication plan, a door hanger that we have enough of to put on every door, and perhaps a better rollout. And I think I think some of it has to do with we were maybe in a hasty situation, end of the year, supply came in, that kind of stuff. I think a lot of lessons have been learned, and that'll be better. But this one particular issue, if you could drill down and let me know where I can get you the constituents' number that they can have a conversation with. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. To the councillor, yes, please pass on that information, and we'll be sure to follow up.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott? No. Councillor Danch?
Just one tonight. I hope everybody's noticing the lights have been put up on Main Street on a lot of the poles. That was done through our Main Street BIA. The lights have been put up and will stay up through the Christmas season, and they're going to be taken down by a company from Fort Erie, and they'll be stored away. I think our former Chamber of Commerce building is looking good. We've lit that up as well, so hopefully we all have a good Christmas. I already know I won't be here for the December meeting. It's probably the only one I really enjoy because it's probably the best one of the year. But wishing everybody a Merry Christmas now because I won't be doing it then. Thank you.
Thank you. You just like all the carols from the students, so you like all the carols from the students. They're good. Councillor Bodnar?
All set.
All set, perfect. Thank you. Bylaws. Any changes, Madam Clerk? No changes, right? As amended, yeah. So we have items 20.1, 20.2, 20.3, 20.4. If I could have Councillor Bruno and Danch move those, and 20. Oh yeah, and the two amendments that were brought forward under 20.1 and 20.2. Just note those. The amendments will be included in those bylaws. Any questions on the bylaws? All in favor? That's carried. So if I get a councillors Bodnar and Elliott move that council do now proceed to meet in closed session under section 239B of the Municipal Act 2001, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered are personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Section 2392C of the Municipal Act 2001, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered is a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Section 2392D of the Municipal Act 2001, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered is labor relations or employee negotiations. Section 2392F of the Municipal Act 2001, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered is advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And Section 2392K of the Municipal Act 2001, where a closed meeting is held if the subject matter being considered is a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. So this ends our public portion of this meeting. We will not be coming back to WeeStream when we come out of closed session. Thank you everybody for attending this evening and watching on our WeeStream channel. This public meeting is adjourned.